In this exercise, we're going to be discussing showing and hiding constraints. I'm going to be using the file 0302 Applying Geometric Constraints as an example file to work with to show you how to show and hide constraints. If you'd like to follow along, once again, the file name is 0302 Applying Geometric Constraints. The main way to show constraints is to either come onto our screen, right-click, and go to Show All Constraints. And then to turn them all off, the easiest way is to right-click, say Hide All Constraints. Great thing about Inventor is if you'll notice, over to the side right here, it actually gives us the shortcut key. F8 shows all constraints. If I hit F9 on my keyboard, it hides all. F8 on, F9 off. That's my main way of turning on and off constraints whenever I'm designing. I use the keyboard shortcuts. You can go right click and go down to it whenever you want to show all constraints. But because sometimes it goes up, sometimes the menu goes down, I just find it easier to go to the F8 and F9. With Inventor, there are several ways to get to different commands, and I suggest you use whatever you feel the most comfortable with. If you're comfortable with right click, use the right click. If you're comfortable with the shortcut keys, use the shortcut keys. The next more precise way to activate constraints is to come up beside the dimension command, and we have the show constraint command. What this allows us to do is very fine-tuned type turning on and off constraints. We can zoom in here and we can look specifically at the center of this circle, or we can look specifically at this line or this line and see one at a time what the constraints are. When we zoom out, you can see how cluttered that can get real quickly. If I hit escape and I turn them all on, you can see that's just way too much information. Even zooming in, that's a lot of information to digest. So what I do is I turn them all off, and then I'll use that show constraint command up here at the top, click on it, and then click on one line at a time. You can even window and show all of one particular part of a sketch. So if you have several objects in your sketch like this, you can show just those particular sketches. This will also show you if something is projected through from another sketch, and it'll show you what it's related to. By hovering over each one, you can see what the other half of that constraint is. And then the same way that we can turn one on at a time by using the show constraint command, we can also just zoom in here on a constraint that we want to turn off and hit the little X there beside it. That doesn't remove the constraint, that just turns it off for the visibility. So just like we have the single show, use the X, it turns it back on. If I turn everything back on again, you see they come right back. So by using this little X, we're only turning the constraints off. If we want to remove a constraint or delete a constraint, the easiest way to do that is to highlight the constraint and then hit delete on our keyboard. See it's highlighted, I hit delete. If I hit F8 to see all constraints again, you'll notice that that constraint is no longer there. I highlight it, hit delete, and once again, that constraint disappears. Now, one of the ones that's a little bit more difficult to get a hold of is that coincident constraint that's on the corners of lines. They want to disappear and get out of your way, which is a very, very helpful tool. A couple releases back, you actually had to deal with all these hundreds and hundreds of little corners. So it made it real nice whenever they added these little yellow dots instead. Only problem with that is whenever you do want to come in here and grab one of these, they're a little slippery. So one of the best ways I found to get a hold of them is you come in, you hover over them. Once you can get them up to appear, click on it and then drag it. Because once you drag it, it knows that, hey, yes, you definitely want to look at this and you want to hold on to it. If I want to delete it, then I could click on it and hit the delete button and it'll remove it. You can see there that corner is no longer coinciding to each other. Other little trick, if you already have one selected and we decide we want to come over here and get this other corner, sometimes the coinciding constraint won't let you grab it. So hit escape on your keyboard to deselect, then come over and grab the coinciding, and it'll actually let you delete that at that point and remove it from your sketch. Once again, like I said, these things are a little slippery, so it may take a couple tries. Hit delete on your keyboard and it'll go away. You'll notice that it automatically, of course, deletes the left and the right side of it. So for example, this dot or the center of this circle is horizontal with the middle of this line. So by selecting the horizontal and hit delete, it automatically deletes that constraint. Now there is this little bit of trash left over, and what that is it created a point on this line. Whenever we did horizontal from the center of the circle to the center of this line, it actually created a point there. I like to remove those. It's not constrained to anything else, so we could just leave them on there. They're not really going to do anything. It's just trash in the way, and then if you come back later trying to figure out what that is there for, it can get confusing real quick. So I do like to remove those whenever possible if I do have some trash like that floating around. Once you delete a constraint, the only way to get it back is we can use the undo command, of course. But if you get out of the drawing and get back into it, there's no way to retrieve that constraint. So good news is they're very easy to get back in and just reapply the constraint. So I've deleted this collinear constraint here, so I can just very quickly come in and re-add it. Hit OK, F8, and you see my collinear constraints back. Another thing, if we do move these around, if you grab a constraint and you just move the little glyph, it's not going to do anything to the constraint. It just makes it a little bit easier to see. You can turn it off, turn it back on, it goes back to the home position. If you right click on a constraint, you can see we get the delete, we can get hide all, and we get undo, and then show all down here at the bottom. And same commands that we've been through before. So if you like to right click, use your right click, or you can use the left pick and just visually pick on these things. Once again, I don't use right click a lot because that's an extra step. It's very easy to click on this, hit delete on my keyboard, and I don't have to do anything. Whereas if I have to right click, I have to right click and then go down to either delete or hide or whatever I needed to do. And so by using delete on my keyboard, I can do it almost simultaneously and save myself that millisecond of having to make that change. Doesn't sound like much, but as you know, if you do things repeatedly all day long, every second that you save accumulates over time and will save you hours at the end of a year that you waste doing things. So we want to do things as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I want you to look for things like that you feel more comfortable with. If you feel like you can do it faster by right-clicking versus picking and then hitting delete, choose the one that's the quickest for you. Once again, to show constraints, we have F8 and F9. Right-click, show all. Right-click, hide all. Then we have our show constraints where we can do it one at a time. We can click on the objects to select. When we're done with this command, we do have to hit the escape command to get out of it, or right-click and hit OK. To turn off the constraints we just turned on one at a time, you can hit the little X beside them. If I had turned on, for instance, this constraint, I can turn off one half of it, or both halves, and it's still there. And then to delete a constraint, I just highlight it, hit delete, or right-click and go to delete in the menu. Showing and deleting constraints are very powerful in sketching, and that's one of the main concepts of sketching. So I encourage you to play with this, and it's a very powerful tool.